Good morning, everybody. I'm Larry Weishuhn. If you enjoy real-world hunting and fishing talk, you're really going to enjoy listening to my good friend, Luke Clayton, and his guest for the next hour.
This is David Fox, and welcome to Outdoors with Luke Clayton and Friends. Luke has been a recognized outdoors writer for the past 3 decades and writes for a host of outdoor publications. Luke pens a weekly newspaper outdoors column that appears in over 40 Texas newspapers. Luke is on the pro staff of Pyramid Air, your one-stop shop for everything air gun related. Smoking techs, electric smokers, feel free to contact Luke through his website, catfishradio.org. Now let's join Luke and his guests for this week's show.
Well, Merry Christmas, everybody. This is going to be our annual Christmas show. Christmas in the outdoors. Larry Weishuhn's going to be is with us, as he's been every year for the past 19 years, I guess. Larry, Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you, Luke, and Merry Christmas to everybody else that's out there. And I need to also extend Christmas wishes to everybody from DSC, Conservation, Education, Hunter Advocacy, Hornady, Accurate, Deadly, Dependable, Stealth Vision that does unbelievable optics. Their headquarters there in Crockett, Texas. We've also need to say something about Taurus and their Raging Hunter handguns that I've been putting to really good use here as of late. And then, of course, can't forget about Vineyard Max. It's up there in the Nacogdoches areas where they're headquartered, and they make the finest deer bait there is, but also some other great products as well too, like deer feeders and a few other things. But from all those folks, I need to tell, they wanted me to tell everybody out there how much they appreciated their business this past year, and how they really want to wish everybody out there a Merry Christmas. Now, with all that said, Luke, I know you've got some Christmas plans coming up here in the next few days, and then the days right after Christmas as well too. Those are always very special around our house.
That's true, Larry. Yeah, a lot of turkey and dressing and ham, and a lot of eating always takes place around our area, our place. But yeah, I got some more hunts coming up. But folks, we are going to devote this whole show. We're going to talk about what Christmas was like when Larry and I were young. When we were we're talking about back in the 1960s even, back in those days. It's going to be a lot of fun, Larry. But right now, to address that, I still have a hunt up at the Choctaw Hunting Lodge. I need to I will get up there. I need to catch a good cold day. Kind of like the old hog killing days. I guess that's where I get all this. I want a good cold day and go up there and hunt that Oryx with the air rifle, with that one of those air rifles, and it's a non-trophy, even maybe a broken horn Oryx, or one with a horn that's off to the side, one that's not a trophy one, and I think that's going to make some excellent meat. So that's on my hit list, Larry. It's coming up, and then right down the road from me is our friend the Cottons. I was talking to Edgar and David about sneaking over there in the afternoon till we get some more venison and get the deer harvested. Some of them that need to be taken off. So lot coming up, Larry. What's your plans? For the Christmas time?
Well, I'm gonna beg to differ with you on one thing, on that not being a trophy Oryx, because the trophy in those things comes in the eating. As you found out, it's absolutely a fantastic meal, no matter how you prepare that meat. And that to me kind of is you need to figure that out, how to be that a kind of around a Christmas present kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the Cotton family. I had an opportunity to spend some time with David and Edgar, and actually had Rick Lambert out, and you came out for an afternoon here not too long ago, and unfortunately the deer just didn't cooperate like we wanted them to. So there just been so many acorns, and the deer are fat and they don't need to move, and with the rain and the cool spells that we've had, hopefully here after Christmas, I'm going to kind of try to spend, like you, spending maybe an afternoon and a morning staying there on the ranch and see if I can't slip in there. And we do need to shoot some does there still. And there's a bunch of management bucks that have not been taken this year yet as well either. So I may try to slip over there, and you and I kind of grant ourselves an equal Christmas present of spending, a little bit of time at the Cottons. We'll do some cooking and tell some stories around the campfire, and make some more Christmas memories amongst ourselves as well too, not just with our family coming up.
That's a good plan right there. Get a good cook fire going out there and grill some maybe some Oryx if I can get it done real quick. If not, we have some venison to eat and maybe even some wild pork, Larry. So, I know it's Christmas time, so Christmas and cooking and eating kind of go together. I'm going to give you a new way that I found to cook wild pork backstrap.
Really?
Yes, I think you're going to. I've done it twice. So even on an average size wild hog that might weigh 140 pounds, let's just say, 125 to 140 pounds. The backstrap is not that big on those hogs. It's not. So what I've started doing is, remove the backstraps just like you would on any hog or any deer, and then cut it into about 5-inch, cut it across.
Right.
Every 5 inches. About 5 inches is just about right. And then that'll give you, you'll probably have four or five pieces of backstrap cross sections, if you will. Well, take a good sharp knife and lengthwise cut those 5-inch long pieces. Cut them into about 1 inch or 3/4 maybe lengths, and they're going to be 5 inches by the thickness of it.
Right.
And then take a meat hammer. The aluminum hammer there, and pound those out flat, thin, where they're thin. And then season them like you want to. You can put whatever, garlic, black pepper, and salt is a must, but you might want to use Cajun seasoning or whatever. And then put them in a Ziploc bag, and I like to add a little Louisiana hot sauce. It doesn't make them hot, but that vinegar kind of, does something to the meat. And that salt also does something to the meat. Leave that in the refrigerator if you can overnight. Leave it a few hours in there, and then you've got little flat steaks, finger steaks, if you will.
Right.
And mix some egg and milk together, mostly egg with a little milk. Stir that up, and dip them in that, and then put them in some flour. And the rest is pretty dang simple. Put them in some hot cooking oil. And then if you want to make a gravy with them, you could put them, make a gravy and add them to the gravy, and kind of like a smothered steaks. But that is a good way, Larry. I mean, nothing wrong with just a good old, backstrap steaks cut across the grain on a hog. But that seems like the meat really takes the seasoning like that. And I don't know, the little steaks they're not crispy, but just a different texture and well seasoned like that. So there's a little Christmas hog cooking tip.
Well, you're right, because you and I both spent some time trying to take a hog to right before Christmas got here, and then of course we're going to be doing some of that right after Christmas as well too. We mentioned going hunting on the cotton there, among other things, with the acorn crops that we've had this year. Those hogs that are out there are in good shape. Yeah, so, hopefully people get out there and get a chance to not only take a good big old whitetail doe or, that buck if they haven't taken it yet that they're looking for, but don't overlook those hogs as well too. And as you mentioned, they are absolutely out of this world good to eat. And to be frank with you, they're a little bit better for you than all the pork that you buy in the grocery store. These days been through all kinds of antibiotics and all those other kind of things. So that wild meat, whether it's from a deer, whether it's from a hog, or if you can get out there and do some squirrel hunting or rabbit hunting, all that meat is so much better for us when you get right down to it. And, everybody, I know New Year's not very far away, and people will be making New Year's resolutions. Well, maybe one of them ought to be that this year I'm going to try to eat a little healthier and spend a little bit more time hunting and fishing and eating some of the wild things that are really better for us than some of the domestic style sockets there.
There's no question about that, Larry. I've read the details on wild pork, and it really ranks way high on a lot of counts, and low in fat. It really is. So yeah, that venison, and so many people. It is cooked differently. I mean, by that it's usually less fat than you would get on domestic meat that you buy at the grocery store. Because these animals, they have to work for a living. They're out. There's more muscle, less fat. But that can be overcome by cooking with moisture and cooking slow. So
right.
Yeah. So anyway, for coming up here, we're going to devote the rest of our show, Larry, to Christmas past, and you're going to talk about growing up in a German community down there in southeast Texas, and I'm going to talk about what it was like down in very rural Red River County back in the 50s and 60s when I was a little whippersnapper, So I think we're going to have a fun show. Folks, stay with us. We're coming back, and we're going to talk about some Christmases from long ago. Well, friends, Mr. Larry Weishuhn is going to tell you about the finest hunting optics that we have ever found.
Luke, these are called Stealth Vision. They come from Crockett, Texas. Dr. John McCall developed them. They're 34 millimeter tubes as opposed to the narrower tubes, so more light transmission. They have a little green light that comes on when that scope is level because that's when you want to pull the trigger. They have an optional lighted reticle as well, too, and a whole lot of other products, and folks can learn more about them by going to stealthvision.com.
Folks, I want to introduce you to Vineyard Max. Now, this is an awesome deer attractant, a food attractant that's made with hammer-milled grape skin, dried hammer-milled grape skins. It has a mixture of rice bran and also corn chops. Very effective. Deer can smell the scent of grapes from a long way, and it brings them in. I've used it in West Texas out with Larry Weishuhn, and we were out there where deer are not even exposed to grapes, and they came right in. Also, Vineyard Max has a very good line of game and fish feeders. Check them out online, vineyardmax.net. Folks, this segment is made possible by Smoking Tex electric smokers that I've been using a long, long time. I want to tell you about a one-stop shop for everything related to game feeders and fish feeders, Ultramatic feeders. I've been using components and feeders from Ultramatic feeders for 20-something years, I guess. They have the remote, which you can remotely activate your feeder with, the timer, which is the most simple timer that I've ever found on a game feeder, and then the eliminator. Check these out. They are worked on centrifugal force, and they seal off the corn supply so coons and squirrels can't get to the corn. Check them out. Ultramatic feeders, you could go online to ultramaticfeeders.com. Well, folks, Mr. Weishuhn is back with us here in segment 2 of our show this week, and we both thought it would be fun to talk about Christmas time back in the day. Now, Larry and I are both in our mid-70s, so we remember Christmases a long time ago. Larry, I think it'll be fun to share some Christmases of yesteryear with our friends.
You know what? That brings back so many great memories. You, like I, grew up out in the country, and really similar but a slightly different kind of situations. But really, you're right. Thinking about Christmas, particularly going back a long time ago, oh my gosh, that brings back so many great memories. And Christmas to me was always special, as I know it was to so many other people. But one of the reasons was that I got to spend time when I was up until the time I was 9 years old. Up to that time, my maternal grandfather, A.J. Aschenbeck, I spent a lot of time with him, and during those early years, and around Christmas, hunting squirrels, because yes, we hunted deer, but there weren't hardly any deer in that country at that time. So that always meant hunting squirrels, and there were still some pecans up in the trees, and if they hadn't been thrashed, and there were a few acorns, and those little squirrels were fat. And I can remember trailing along behind him, and a dog that he had was kind of a cross between a hound and from what I recall, remembering him. He called him Hunter, but it seemed like he was a cross between a bird dog and a hound. So that was our squirrel dog.
Yeah.
But that was part of Christmas as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, yep. It was a different time, Larry. I remember my folks had an old country store down in Dimple Community,
Right.
which is north of Clarksville in Red River County. And back, we're talking about the mid-'50s, say 55, when I was about 5 years old. I remember that old wood-burning stove, just like
Oh my
you
gosh.
read about a lot of those type places. There may be some kind of like that, but there's no pot-bellied stove back in the back. Had a on a rock base. I remember just old gravel base that it would set on. And some of the old timers back then, it seemed like around Christmas, winter time, they'd spend a lot of times, guys back in their 60s and 70s and 80s. And I remember sitting around that old stove. I didn't do any talking, but I did a lot of listening. That and I remember we cut a Christmas tree. I was about 6 years old. I've told you this story, Larry. My dad took a handsaw and he said, "Well, let's go cut a Christmas tree."
Uh-huh.
Well, we would always cut a small pine tree. It was easy to decorate and all that, So we go back behind the house. And there's a little pine plantation, just not a whole lot of pine, but a lot of pines about 6 foot tall. And then around the perimeter was some big pines. I was back in there, Larry, and my dad was separated. We were both looking different areas, and some pigs come up. Little, I don't know, 4 or 5 pigs come out of the trees, and I was out there, and I never will forget. And I thought, but I was raised with around hogs. My dad raised hogs, and I said, wait a minute, where's the mother? I remember thinking about that. And I also thought about, wait a minute, this might not be the best situation. So I started looking for a tree right away, and a big old pine tree with some low limbs. And here come Mama out of there. She was,
oh my goodness,
yes, this happened. I can recall it in my mind like yesterday. And the old sow come out of there, and she was grunting and, had her hackles up, she in an aggressive, defensive mode is what she was. And I just scurried up that tree like a squirrel and run over there. And I I remember hollering at my dad. I said, there's a big hog or whatever, And he circles around and comes up behind the tree. And about that time, that old hog runs right up to the tree, and I'm in it, and he is soon in that tree himself, and I just remember that like yesterday, and that old sow stayed there for I don't know, a good 5 or 8 minutes, just around looking up at us, and I thought, he dropped he dropped the handsaw, and the old sow was sniffing that saw, and I never will forget that, and that was before wild hogs really became prevalent. In our part of the world. There were some on the Red River, and then there were some on the Sulphur River. Guys used to hunt them with dogs back in the 50s, boar they called them.
Oh, yes.
They were, and occasionally someone would actually kill one. But that was one of my earliest remembrances. And they left, and we cut our little Christmas tree down and drug it out of there. Nobody got bit. So that's one of my Christmas memories that I don't think I'll ever forget, Larry.
No, you won't. I think you just instilled it in a lot of other people, and as well a memory that you created. But now I got a little bit better understanding as to why you love hunting wild hogs as much as what you do.
I'm still trying to get, Larry. I'm still trying to get even with that sow.
Well, we didn't have wild hogs where I grew up. Of course, I say that they were not wild. Now we had a bunch of brood sows and raised our own pigs and had our own little pig feedlot, if you will. And some of those sows, I remember, they were mean. When we'd go in and try to catch those pigs when they were small and castrate the males, kind of thing. And oh my God, were they mean? But a lot of times too, that happened around. You got me thinking, because we had a lot of sows that Farragut had pigs when it was Christmas time, and of course that was also right before Christmas when it started turning cool. That's when we started. That was hog killing time. My gosh, back then my granddad would buy old boars at the auction and would castrate them, and he would put them on feed for about 5-6 years. And some of those hogs that we butchered right before Christmas, and it was always right before Christmas because that's when we got some cold weather.
Yeah.
It looked like we were going to have cold weather. But I remember some of those hogs that we shot and killed, and then scraped and butchered there at home. Some of those old boar hogs are castrated hogs, barrows, if you will, I guess now. They'd weigh 1,000 pounds.
You've told me about that, yeah.
I've got pictures somewhere of my dad, and it was like 3 days before Christmas. I remember it well because there was a big tree that used to be in the backyard and long since gone. But he and I are standing next to a hog that once we got the guts out of, weighed 892 pounds.
Oh my gosh!
So this thing, was absolutely huge. So I get tickled every once in a while when I hear about big hogs and and the guns. I know we're getting away from Christmas here a little bit, but my God, it's bringing. I used to be the one to have to shoot the hog because my dad or my uncle, they would catch as soon as that hog went down, they'd cut its throat and collect the blood, and they would make blood sausage out of it as well too. It's part of it. Yeah. And so we'd shoot those big hogs with 22 shots, but we'd shoot them, we'd brain them kind of thing, and they went down very quickly. But the other thing about Christmas is that do you remember? Did you get a gun for Christmas?
When I was about 8 years old, I got a J.C. Higgins single shot 22. It had that little knurled bolt that you pull straight back. I remember it's all I could do to pull it. It was a strong spring on that thing. And and I never will forget this today. And folks, don't do this today. But I remember getting that thing, and I was about 8, and it was dark. Of course, it was like early in the morning. And I was so excited. I asked my dad, I said, can I shoot it? He says, well, yeah, just shoot it up in the air. Of course, behind our house was 20 million miles of nothing back there.
Right.
No houses, nothing like that. And he said, yeah, just go ahead and shoot it. I put a little 22 short in that thing and walked out to the door and just stuck it up there and shot. To me, that was the most exciting thing that I'd ever done, But yeah, that was my first real rifle. I'd had BB guns before that, but yeah, I had a BB gun, and that little rifle, I wish I would give anything to still own that rifle. But it was made by J.C. Higgins. That was Sears, wasn't it? Yeah.
Right.
Sears.
Yeah, and most of those were made by either Winchester or Remington under their name. Those were, private label type of things. And probably, I'm guessing that was probably a Winchester about that time. One of my first guns was the Remington 33 single shot bolt action. Had that knurl that you're talking about. That was actually the first bolt action that Remington made, and that one belonged to my granddad, and that's one I hunted squirrels with. But one of the Christmas presents that I always look forward to every year when I was young is boxes of 22 shells. Now back then, you could buy 22 shorts, 22 long, and 22 long rifle, and each one of them had a little bit, more powder as you went up. With the long rifle, I mean that was the deer cartridge.
Oh yes, yes.
And the 22 shots you used on squirrels and that kind of thing, and occasionally you used the long on them because if you're going to be shooting up high in a tree somewhere, but. Those things, gosh, I can remember those were most of the time. I think back then they were either Remington or Winchester.
I think you're right, Larry. This Christmas show. This is our Christmas show. So, stick with me. We need to take a break, but we're going to be right back, and we're going to talk some more old times and Christmas. How about that?
That sounds like a winner to me.
Folks, let's talk a little outdoor cooking. Let me tell you about an electric smoker that I've been using for 15 years, I guess. Smoking Tex electric smokers. If you're tired of staying up all night keeping that wood fire burning when you're barbecuing, give Smoking Tex a try. They're made to last a lifetime. You can check them out at smokingtex.com. That's SMOKINTEX.com.
For seasonings, anything to do with outdoor cooking, all kind of jerky seasonings, sausage seasonings, Butcher Packer Supply. That's butcherpackersupply.com. I think the website is butcher-packer.com.
Big Sam left Seattle in the year of 92 with George Pratt, his partner, and brother Billy too. They crossed the
Friends, this segment is made possible by Platinum Cadillac and Chevrolet in Terrell, Texas. Stop by and visit with my buddy Mr. Justin Rudd and his team of experts and let them put you in a new Chevy pickup or a Cadillac or whatever you might be in the market for. Also, the Choctaw Hunting Lodge up in southeast Oklahoma. Check them out at ChoctawHuntingLodge.com. Also made possible by Pyramid Air, your one-stop shop for everything airgun related. Well, folks, we're back with my friend Larry Weishuhn, and we're talking about Christmases of long ago. Larry, you were talking about the 22. I don't know if 22 longs are even made anymore. When you go buy 22 shells, you buy 22 long rifles. It's hard to find shorts, 22 shorts. A lot of people don't even know what we're talking about, I bet you. But do they still make a 22 long? I don't think they do. I don't know.
I would suspect they don't, because I have not seen a box of those. I mean, I try to go by gun shops, those kind of things, and look to see what's there. But I haven't seen a box of 22 shorts or 22 longs, either one. Everything I've ever seen that I can remember here is the last bunch of years has been the long rifle. Now, the 22 short was about half the length of that long rifle. And the long was they're talking about the cases, and the long was probably about 3/4 or so the length of the current 22 shells that we have. But each one of them had its own little power capabilities when you got down to it.
Little niche there. And then if you really want something powerful, get you a long rifle hollow point. Remember that?
Oh my God, yes. That was my deer cartridge for the first several years that I hunted, and that was another part of Christmas as far as I'm concerned. When I was fairly small, when I was probably about 9, 10, somewhere along there, we built a camp house back behind our house, probably about not even a quarter of a mile back behind the house, probably back in the woods. Mm-hmm. And when Christmas time came, we had Christmas at the house, and Christmas at my brother's mom and dad, primarily there, and occasionally over at my dad's mom and dad as well too. And then we would move to the camp house for a week, and you talk about a cast iron stove. It was a one-room building with a tin on the outside, no insulation or anything like that. We had a curtain that we could pull across where the beds were, and we had a wood stove in there. And I remember that wood stove, cast iron wood stove. Sometime my dad would get it so hot that everybody we'd be standing in the corners, rather than standing by the fire. But we we'd set a Christmas tree up there as well too, and kind of continue celebrating Christmas. And back then, of course, my mom and dad had a bunch of friends that lived out there fairly close to where we did, and everybody'd come over, and usually at night during the Christmas holidays, uncles and aunts and friends come over, and we'd have a big stew, or we'd have, they barbecue chicken, or it was a big deal.
It was. I remember actually the first deer hunt that I was ever on, if you could call it a hunt, was just before Christmas. Back in, I was probably about 8 or 9 years old. My brother-in-law used to let me tag along with him. Guys back then, there very few of them were really experienced deer hunters in my part of the world, up in northeast Texas, because they didn't grow up hunting deer. There just weren't very few deer. So my brother-in-law invited me on this hunt, and I hope the statute of limitations is up. I think it is. This was back a long time ago in another era. Anyway, we were with a gentleman who was well known, like a mountain man of 1959. He really was. He lived in a cabin back in the woods with his grandmother. Now, I won't call any names, but anybody from Red River County that's been over the age of 60 knows who I'm talking about. This guy would take 22 shorts, and he would go out at night, and that's how he fed a lot of the meat that they had to eat back in the day.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was friends with my brother-in-law. So let's go deer hunting, and Luke, you can go too. So I went. They put me up in a pine tree, and I stayed. I stayed in that tree till they come got me. Never saw a deer, and but it was the first deer hunt. So on the way back, we were in a 1956 Crown Victoria Ford sedan. That was our hunting car. So my brother-in-law had a .22 Magnum, which I thought, whoa, Magnum, this must be some kind of rifle.
Yes.
That was his deer gun. I don't know if he'd ever even seen a wild deer. Probably had, but he was not a deer hunter. This old boy, his friend, was a deer hunter from way back. So they picked me up, and we're driving out, and this old guy, he wasn't an old man. He was big old boy, and he was driving out there, and he had ordered through the mail a Chinese bolt-action military rifle of some sort. I remember, it had a shell as long. He had steel. They were steel shells. They weren't our Hornadies that we hunt with today. But he was bragging on the rifle. Said, "Oh man, that dang thing looked. You lay it down in the back seat of that old car. It will barely fit in the seat. It was that long. I don't know what it was. Anyway." We're coming out of there, and he says to my brother-in-law, he says, now right around the corner, back on the side of there's a grove of oak trees. He said the last 3 nights or 3 mornings there's 3 deer been standing there. So he said, I want you to shoot one if you can. And nobody said buck, nobody said doe. He said deer.
Just deer.
He said, if there's a deer there, I want you can get your first deer, Billy. So we get on down there, and he starts going slow, and that Ford, he's getting real slow, and he starts looking. Sure enough, there was 2 deer. I remember it like yesterday. There were 2 does standing there. Well, something happened in that old boy's brain because he didn't tell my brother-in-law, okay, get out with that .22 Magnum and get a good rest. He jumped out with that big military Chinese rifle. And kaboom, before we knew what happened, he'd already shot one. Well, I never forget, the deer ran across the clearing up in front of us and disappeared in the woods. Well, I didn't know anything about blood trailing. My brother-in-law didn't. Right. He did. So he went back to where the deer were, and he looked, and he said, he's shooting a steel bullet, like a military round that he ordered through the mail. And no expansion. So he'd pinhole that deer with that big old rifle. Well, so he was a sharp deer hunter. He says, well, I must have hit it behind the shoulder or something. He said, I think this deer is going to run a long way. So let's go back home. And here's what I remember the most. Bottom line is, we get back there, and he said, Ma will fix us a good breakfast. Larry, she had some home cured ham, and cooked it on a wood stove, big old wood stove. And she didn't start cook. Well, she probably had the ham cooked, but she was cooking all that other stuff. Big old cat head biscuits. I remember that. Gravy, eggs. A bunch of, we probably ate 3 or 4, even me, 3 or 4 eggs apiece. But one of the best breakfasts I've ever eaten in my life.
I'll be darned.
And so then the old boy, he always had some good dogs, trailing dogs. Right. And he said, well, we're going to go back, and he had 2 hounds. We're going to cut them loose, and they'll find that deer. And I said, okay, well, how we're going to get a deer, Now, after the big breakfast, it's probably about 10:30 in the morning. load those 2 old hounds in that dang 56 Crown Victoria in the trunk of it, mind you. Shut them up in that trunk. And make the drive back down there to that big ranch, which you have hunted on in the same area. I'm not calling any names.
No, but I know where you're talking
about. You know exactly. You shot a big boar in that area a few years ago. Anyway, we go back, and he cuts those. He said, now, we might have to wait a while. He cuts those dogs loose, Larry, and you could hear them. You know, they picked up the scent right away, and they hooked them. And you'd hear them, roar, 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 and then roar, roar, way back in the bottoms, and finally they just disappeared. I mean, no sound. And this old boy, the old mountain man dude, he said, I don't know. He said, I was worried about his dogs big time. He said, well, we're going to have to go back home. And he said, I'll come back later this evening and see if I can pick up. Maybe they found a deer. And I thought, we can't leave like this. But there was really no need to stay, because those dogs had run they're probably half a mile back in that heavy woods. and I thought, well, I remember asking him, well, what about your dogs? I mean, you can't just leave them, can you? Oh, they'll find the cabin. You know, we were probably 3 or 4 miles from the cabin, you know. But anyway, that happened just before Christmas back in about 1959. I don't know if he ever found the deer. I doubt. Maybe he did. If anybody could have found it, this guy could have found that deer, you know.
and chances are he probably did. I mean, those solid bullets, if you want to call them that, or steel jacket, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. You know, they would create a hole, and that deer probably could have gone, half a mile. And if those dogs were hounds, and hounds got a sound that he makes, a bark that he makes when he's trailing, and then when he's treed or he's bayed, it becomes kind of a chop kind of thing rather than ooh. It's kind of chop kind of thing. So I got a feeling he may have ended up finding that deer, but oh my goodness, what a great memory though. So much revolves around hunting with the Christmas holidays from the time, and that was one of the things I really look forward to, because not only was it Christmas and I got to spend time with my granddad, my mom and dad, and then when my brother came along, we got to hunt. That was a time that we really set aside to where that week we were out of school. I could hunt afternoon, I could hunt in the morning, never hardly got to hunt all day long like I wanted to, because of all the cattle and the hogs and the horses and the dogs, and
they were hungry.
They were hungry and needed water. But gosh, what just thinking about what you were talking about as you were talking, I was thinking about all the great memories from those really early years. Gosh almighty, thank you.
Well, thank you, Larry. Let's take another break and then let's wrap up our Christmas show. How about that?
That sounds like a winner to me again.
For about the past decade, I've been hunting editor for Air Gun Hobbyist magazine. I think the only magazine devoted strictly to air gun shooting and hunting in the country. Well, in that length of time, I've learned quite a bit about big bore air guns and smaller calibers too. A spot to go to that if you're interested in air guns, you need to know about Pyramid Air. The website is PYRAMYD, pyramidair.com. They have anything and everything you need, from the guns themselves, the big bores or the smaller calibers, to the accessories. Just remember pyramidair.com, and there's a number when you get on the website if you need to call and talk to somebody. Give them a buzz, and they can fill you in on little details that you might need to know about shooting or hunting with big bore air guns.
The snowflakes fall as winter comes, and time just seems to fly.
Friends, this segment is brought to us by CVA muzzleloaders. In my opinion, the very best muzzleloaders in the world, the ones that I shoot. You can check them out online, cva.com. Kubi's Wild Game Processing and Kubi's Restaurant in Dallas, and Vineyard Max, maker of some awesome deer attractant and some very fine game feeders and fish feeders, located down in Nacogdoches, Texas. Check them out at vineyardmax.net. Folks, I want to introduce you to some good friends of mine at Dash for Cash Pawn Shop in Seagoville, Texas, located at 133 Hall Street. The phone number is 972-287-3121. Go by there and talk with Gary or Randy, the owner. They're great people. They've got some great prices. Again, that's the Dash for Cash Pawn Shop, Seagoville, Texas, 972-287-3121. Well, folks, Larry Weishuhn is back with me, and we are reliving some Christmases long ago. Larry, talking about those old coon dogs and trailing the deer up, and that particular hunt happened about this time, just before Christmas, back in I believe the year was 1959. I was about 9 years old. But as far, you come from a German heritage. Your folks were German. You're German. Was there any traditions or anything, sausage making or anything like that was a tradition of German folks in your community at Christmas, or was it just much like maybe where I grew up? I don't know.
In a lot of ways, it was very similar to what I think were probably where you grew up. My folks, my ancestors had been there, in that part of the world for the time I grew up. Over 100 years, over 100 years. And so they had kind of Texanized themselves, but at the same time, as I've spoken about in the past, till I started going to school, first grade, I could barely speak English. I could understand it, but everybody where I grew up at that point, spoke German and Low German, which it's kind of like what I found out is very similar to Afrikaans when I went to Africa years ago. Yeah. But the traditions were very similar to most every place else, I think, other than, as I mentioned earlier, that was hog killing time just right before between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And part of the deal is that you hoped you'd have some fresh bacon or some fresh ham, which were all pretty much salt cured when you got right down to it by the time that the Christmas time got there. Now, one of the traditions my granddad had for the longest time when I was little bitty, until something happened. Yep. Every year at Christmas Eve, we would have Christmas at their house. He lived down on Cummins Creek on a hill that kind of jutted out to Cummins Creek, which I found out later and was a huge Indian camp because they used to find airheads there all the time, and then really got to looking at different things. But what they would do, he was a county commissioner, so he had access to dynamite. Well, Christmas Eve, after everybody had Christmas around the Christmas tree and had an unbelievable meal of, all kinds of different things, including turkey and ham and, whatever else there might be. And he and his son, Uncle Herbert, my dad, and my dad's twin brother, Lee, they were married to sisters, his wife's daughter. Well,
Larry, I'm going to hold up just a minute. Folks, we are doing this live, and we are on a cell phone connection. So there was a little bit of the signal decided to drop at an important time. So kick it back off, Larry. You're coming in strong right now. This is live radio,
It is for a fact, Luke. And of course, you and I don't live very close together when you're right down to it. But I was probably at the time each year, my granddad, who was a county commissioner, had access to dynamite. And every year, Christmas Eve, after we'd had Christmas and we'd had everything to eat, when it was good and dark, he and his son, my Uncle Herbert, and my dad, and his twin brother, Uncle Lee, they were married to Grandpa Eisenbeck's daughters. So they were married to sisters. But they would go out into the bottom of not the Cummins Creek itself, but the bottom area. And every year there were always some stumps that needed to be blown up. So they would take that dynamite and they would pack that dynamite underneath that stump and then light a long fuse and then, try to get back up on top of the hill before the thing went off. Well, one year, and I mean they'd blow up 8 or 10 stumps, and I mean the whole world would shake.
Oh, I bet. Yep.
And you'd see this huge flash out there, and well, one year I think they got into Four Roses a little bit heavy, and they packed an unbelievable amount of dynamite underneath one of these stumps that was a little bit close to the house. Well, when they finally lit that thing up and it went off, I mean, it blew pieces of wood all over the house and, onto the tin roof. And that was the last year that my grandmother would allow them to do that kind of thing. So, but that was a tradition. I mean, a Christmas tradition around our house until I was about 9. Well, until I was about 8 years old. I think the 8th year that finally they said, okay, no more. I guess by then they'd blown all the stumps out of there as well too.
A German stump blowing tradition right there. I never told you, Larry, and I know our friends. When I was about, I don't know, an older teenager, I worked for a powder man out of Arkansas on a construction crew. It just reminded me of a. It was about just prior to Christmas, and this was probably I was probably 18. But I was working. He was a dynamite man, and they were shooting rock along a long creek, and they were drilling holes. My job was to run the wagon drill and drill these holes down in the ground. He'd mark them with stakes, tell me how deep to drill, 24 foot, 20 foot, whatever. And then we would go in there, and I got to work with this old guy. He was up in his 60s, and I was about 18, I guess. I don't know. And we'd go in there, and it's 40% and 60% dynamite, as I remember. And he was a master at this. And he would, I'd pull a little cart thing, would bring us crate of dynamite, and he'd drop in like 2 sticks, and then he'd pour nitrogen fertilize on top of those, and then and you run the wires, you hook it all up, wire it all up, and he called the police department or the sheriff or whatever, and told them we was going to set one off. And I remember that like yesterday. The only thing that I could do wrong on that job was one thing. I was called the oiler it was an old Northwest cable pull excavator, big old run on cables, instead of hydraulics. This was in the late 60s probably. And the old fella, I forget his name, he's a good man, but he was plenty stern. 2 cans of Sweet Sue chicken and dumplings were to be set on the manifold of that big old machine at 11 o'clock every day. If I did that, I could probably do no wrong, Larry. But I remember that just before Christmas time, that particular deal, working with that old guy. It was so much fun. That has little to do with Christmas tradition, but one of the things,
It does though, in a way. I mean, you remember so many different things about spending time with family, and maybe certain gifts. Like with my instance was the first Red Ryder that I got when the BB gun. Well, probably as I recall, I think there's a photograph of me somewhere when I was 3 years old, kind of thing. And then a 410 shotgun, a single barrel shotgun that I got, that I used to hunt doves. And back then I was not a wing shot, but I was a darn good limb shot.
Rifle shooter. And another thing I remember, I had a horse when I was about, I got one when I was about 7 years old, just a gray, just a mare, good riding horse, all it was. And I didn't have a saddle for 2 or 3 years. Sometimes I'd put a blanket on, a saddle blanket on there and strap it down with a, cinch it down, and a lot of times I just rode bareback,
Right.
But I got a saddle, a brand new saddle, when I was about 10 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
I never will. I had a brother that was 18 years older than me, and I never will forget. He put that saddle Christmas morning on and come walking in on all fours like a horse. I got to ride. And here's another thing. That saddle came from Swaim, Swaim, Swaim Hardware in Paris, Texas. and that hardware store is still there. The same,
Really?
the same building, Swaim Hardware, near downtown Paris, Texas. I remember going in there before Christmas. I didn't know I was going to actually get a real saddle, but I remember going in there looking at those saddles, that smell of that new leather, man.
Oh, absolutely, yes, sir.
It had a 10-year-old all fired up. Larry, we've done this before in years past, talked about Christmas, but we've never devoted all of our Catfish Radio show to this till this year. But it's been fun. I hope our guests, some of the young folks, they're probably thinking back or listening to some of the things we're talking about, and it's totally foreign to them, but that's the way it was back in the day, wasn't it,
It really was, but I know they created memories when they were younger as well too.
Yep.
So hopefully we've kind of flipped the switch to people to recall some of the things that were so special about Christmases in the past and our present Christmas as well too. And we're so very blessed to live in the country that we do, to thankfully have the leadership that we do right now. And with all that said, we need to wish everybody the very merriest of Christmas and the safest Christmas. And don't forget the reason that Christmas exists is because of the birth of Christ. So
that's right.
Wish everybody the very, very best. And, I can't wait to hear some more stories from you. And we'll be back together with everybody here next week. At least I will for the first segment with you.
Folks, that about wraps our show up for this week. I've enjoyed being with you, and I hope you had a good time, too. And, folks, we're also brought to you by the Choctaw Hunting Lodge up in southeast Oklahoma, located about, 45 minutes west of Hugo, Oklahoma, owned by the Choctaw Nation. It's about 45,000 acres of awesome mountain, country, hills, valleys, loaded with game. Lots of eastern turkey, and they do eastern turkey hunts if you're looking for a spot to hunt turkey in the spring.